Here we had round 3 of the October Rising Star Rapid Tournament, and I was playing the black pieces in this game against a young boy. I had played this kid before, I think 3 times, and I have 3 victories against him. And I think maybe knowing that he had lost several times to me before might have affected how he played this game. If you saw my previous video, round 2 of this tournament, you'd see that I talked about how passive I played and how dangerous it is to play passively. And I think my opponent played quite passively this game. And although he didn't make any mistakes out of the opening into the middle game, I think his playing passive gave me a very simple game. And he was just responding to whatever I was doing, allowing me to sort of try to make the decisions. So he played the move e4 this game, and I responded with c6, the Caro-Kann, and he looked to put his second pawn in the center of the board. Typical opening moves of the Caro-Kann game. So here he played d4. I responded d5, and I was wondering, is it going to be an exchange caro, an advanced caro, or some other knight move for white, going into maybe a tartacar or something else. Here he advanced the pawn, and so I like to play the move c5 against this, which is the Botvinnik-Karls defense. Now the Botvinnik-Karls defense can be very sharp. I think if they decide to take that pawn immediately, it can get quite complicated. But here he opted for just the safe move, knight to f3, and I responded knight to c6. We're both looking at the d4 pawn, and here he decides to defend that d4 pawn again by playing the move c3, which I was very happy to see, because this immediately gives me a target in the game. I've taken that pawn in the middle. His logical move is to control the center, recapture with the c pawn, which is what he does, and now he has a backwards pawn. So that pawn on d4 is going to be my main target. And here you can see I'm already going after d4 by playing my bishop to g4. The bishop on g4 pins his defender of the d4 pawn. So that knight is not defending the pawn anymore, because if it were to move and recapture on d4, I would win his queen. Here he plays his bishop out to e3, defending the pawn again. And I know here I can just play e6 and make room for my knight to come to e7 and then up to f5, where it will also look at the d4 square. Now I think this next move by my opponent is a real moment that I think a mistake was made. And although the engine is going to say it's a book move, bishop to e2 is so passive, because if you think about it, what is that bishop doing? It's literally just stopping the pin, so the knight is no longer pinned. But if I don't want that knight to be useful, I can just take the knight off regardless. Bishop comes to f3, and then he has no more defenders of the d4 pawn, because I got rid of the knight. So really, I think bishop e2 is a mistake. And yes, it's a book move, the engine likes it, but I think practically it just doesn't make as much sense. That paired with the move h3, which often people play, is a big mistake, because h3 is just slow. So here I just continue with the plan and put my knight on f5. I think instead of playing bishop to e2, the bishop on b5 is way more annoying, because it's actually dealing with one of my attackers of the d4 pawn. It's pinning it to the king, so my knight on c6 wouldn't be useful at all. Here he plays his knight to f3. I think maybe another mistake, because it's not defending the pawn. Maybe better would have been put the knight on d2, and then you could have replaced the knight on f3, or even played the knight to b3, and both squares it would defend the pawn on d4. So I was feeling pretty confident here, almost like I'm up a pawn. Maybe there's a way for the engine to save it for white, but I don't think so. I think this position is just very good for black. So right now I'm just considering, how do I want to keep attacking that d4 pawn? I was really thinking about putting the queen on b6. I was wondering, should I try to put my bishop on b4 so that I can prioritize castling? Should I think about just going for the trade on f3 immediately? I decided to go for the safe approach. Here's to being safe in a chess game again. Just developing my bishop and getting ready to short castle. I thought this was logical, but also I'm not planning on taking the knight on c3, because if I do, and all of a sudden I'm not winning the d4 pawn because he would recapture that bishop. So bishop takes on c3, and then b takes on c3, and now the b pawn has become a c pawn and is protecting the d4 pawn. So here I was thinking, if he kicks my bishop, I'm just going to pull it back to a5 and then put it on b6, which looks like a great square for it. And here, if he kicks my bishop on g4, I'm just trading off that defender of the d4 pawn. So now you can see he's going to recapture. And how many defenders does he have on the d4 pawn? He's only got 2. And right now I have 2 attackers, so I just need 1 more attacker. So I was thinking here, maybe I play queen b6, or maybe I castle. And I opted to castle first, and then look to attack that d4 pawn. Here my opponent pushed a3, and I knew my next move should probably be bishop a5 and pull it back to the b6 square, because then I'd be looking at the d4 pawn again. And literally this whole game is just revolved around that d4 pawn. My opponent, maybe sensing this, plays his bishop to g4, looking to trade off my knight before I'm able to get a third attacker on that pawn. And here I try to first consider, can I take on d4? His bishop takes, my knight takes, his queen takes, and then do I have anything? No, I don't. I was wondering, is there any way to pin a piece or any of that? Because sometimes if like a knight takes and the king's on the other side or something, you'd be able to win something. But here I just have to take off his bishop on e3. And I'm fine with this because it ruins his pawn structure a bit. It doubles his pawns. And now he doesn't have that f2 pawn that is a good defender of his position. So I knew that maybe I would be able to get some sort of kingside attack going if I did trade off this bishop. So I went for this. Here I saw, after he took on e3 with his pawn, that my dark squared bishop was somewhat misplaced. It didn't look like it really was going to be doing anything this game, and so I decided to just capture the knight on f3. The engine says this is my best move. The reason I swap off here is because if he plays the move b4, then where does my bishop go? I mean, back to c7 initially, and then maybe move the queen and put the bishop on d8. It just looks really awkwardly placed, and I thought his knight's going to be more powerful than my bishop is. So I went for this swap. And now I started asking myself, where do my pieces want to be placed? I saw my knight had a beautiful square on c4. It's not going to maybe do anything on c4 initially, but probably at some point it's going to be very useful there. It can't be kicked. It's a great outpost. So I played my knight to a5 so that I could play it to c4. I'm also going to be eyeing that e3 pawn. Just looked really nice. My opponent plays his queen up to d3. Not sure what his plan was with this move. Maybe just eyeing h7, but it's going to take him a little bit of time to get an attack going. But also, I mean, it's a centralized queen. It connects his rooks, so it made logical sense. I continue with my plan, just putting my knight on its best square, c4. My opponent plays his rook up to f2, preparing to get his other rook over to f1, having 2 pieces lined up on my f7 pawn. Wasn't really afraid of this. I just thought that I needed to potentially move in here. Maybe get my queen onto g5 or h4, and maybe swing my other rook over onto the c file, or even get ready to play the move f6 myself. The move queen g5 looked more active than having it on d8, so I went for this move initially. I didn't think that there was any big danger here. He doesn't have a dark squared bishop that can kick me. He doesn't have a knight that can attack my queen. So I was feeling comfortable on this square. Maybe at some point he'd be able to play rook f5, but nothing yet. And it was here where my opponent finally made an error. He played his rook up to f3, and when he did this, I thought, this doesn't seem right. I mean, he played his rook up to f2, now he was playing it up to f3. And maybe he was just trying to protect the pawn on e3 because I was attacking that pawn twice with my knight and my queen. But would have probably been better to swing the other rook over to e1. But here I saw I have the move h5. And h5 traps his bishop. And so I knew my position was winning here. He's just going to have to probably capture on h5, and I'm going to win his bishop. So I'll be up 2 points of material. This looked really good. And I knew now I just have to play solid and trade down and hopefully win this game smoothly. My opponent plays his king up to f2. A sort of strange move. I thought he would, at least try to take the pawn on h5. But, yeah, I guess he wanted to get his rook active, maybe on h1 or something. Wasn't entirely sure, to be honest, but here I knew I could just capture the bishop. And I figured it's probably good to just capture it immediately. Although I was considering maybe bring another rook into the game because I still have time to take the bishop, but then I also give him time to take the pawn on h5. And I would rather him have to recapture on g4 with his h-pawn. So that's what I was thinking about. I suppose here, when he moved his king to f2, maybe he was thinking rook h1 after he would recapture on g4, and that would open up the h-file. I saw this, and I didn't think it looked too bad. So I decided to capture his bishop. He immediately recaptured, and now that h-file is open. I thought I could play f6 at some point and just swing my other rook over to, h8 when my king goes to f7, but here I was looking, maybe I should just take the free pawn, or maybe I should check on h4. The check looked better. If he blocks with rook, then his rook is pinned. Although, I don't know, pinning his rook, I don't know if it was all that great, if that's what's going to happen. But I'm at least controlling the h-file with my queen. He's not able to play his rook to h1. He slid his king over to e2. And here I was trying to decide, do I activate my other pieces or do I take a pawn? So the g4 pawn was my main candidate move. I was also wondering, can I go queen h2? But also f6 is something I need to be thinking about, just so that my other rooks can get into the game. But here I decided I'll just take the pawn on g4 and I'll give him the h-file. Didn't think that was too big of an issue right now, because I can actually just capture on g2. And if his rook's on h1, that's a fork, and I'd be winning one of his rooks for free. I took the pawn on g4. I knew my opponent was going to be struggling for some good moves here. He just put his king back on f2. This gave me another opportunity to check on h4. So I thought about that immediately. But then I saw maybe I can trade off the queens. And I slid my queen over to e4. Because a queen trade, even if it doubles my pawns, is good. I'm up a whole minor piece. I just want to make sure that I don't mess up. If I'm able to trade off queens, there's a much less likelihood of me hanging a piece. He clearly doesn't want to lose the game, so he tries to hold on to his queen, and so he pulls it back to e2. I really like this move by my opponent. It shows he's got a fighting spirit. He wants to keep the game going and hope that I'm going to blunder at some point, which is very likely because I am the blunder man. But here, now that his queen has moved, I thought maybe it's best to just get the other rook in the game. So now I really was thinking f6 looks like the best move. I do a few blunder checks, make sure this isn't a big mistake, and then I play f6. He captures my pawn on f6 fairly promptly, and now I just have a decision. Do I want to take with the rook, or do I want to take with the pawn? If I take with the rook, then his rook is probably going to capture, and I can recapture with the g-pawn, and that looks ideal. So I went for this. Capturing with pawn 2, I think it was totally fine. Then I could have just moved the king up to f7. But yeah, this just looked a little more decisive because there's no way for him to block the rooks now. And it looks like I'm going to be able to trade off another piece. He captures my rook, and I have a quick think, and I'm deciding, should I recapture with the pawn, or should I throw in a check first? I don't think it really mattered too much. But the check on h4 actually seemed more interesting. I could then take on f6 with the queen if I wanted, but I just thought that the queen was better placed on the h-file. That way, his rook's never getting active. So if I just take here on f6 with the pawn, his rook can come to h1, much more active. My king's more exposed. So checking on h4 was definitely the way to go here, I think, but probably not a big deal at the end of the day. So I threw this check in. He blocked with the pawn to g3. I checked him on h2, and now this forces a queen trade, which I was very happy about. He plays his king up to f3. I can now trade off queens and then take the rook, and I'm just going to be up a knight. So this is what I went for. Queen takes on e2. He recaptures with his king. And now I recaptured the rook on f6. The rest of this game was fairly simple. He brings his rook over to the f-file, targeting the f6 pawn. I move my king up to g7 just to defend the pawn, looking to swing my rook over to the h-file, hopefully to get super active. He moved his rook up to f4. Not entirely sure what this move did. I didn't know why it was a better decision. But his pawn on a3 was hanging, so I thought, might as well grab that before he's able to push it and cause some nuisance with it. And then hopefully I'll be able to activate my rook. So grabbed the pawn on a3. He throws in a check on g4. I guess that's why he played the rook to f4. But honestly, it doesn't really do all that much. I just slide my king over to f7. Here he moves his rook to h4, intending to try to maybe come to h7 and win the b7 pawn. So rook h4. I don't want any funny business. I pull my rook over to g8, targeting his g3 pawn, but also getting ready to play rook to g7 so that he can't do anything funny. His rook comes to h7. I just defend my king with the rook and offer a rook trade, which I was very happy to see him accept. I think if you're down in an endgame like this, your best chance is to keep pieces on. So he shouldn't have traded here, but I think he knew the game was going to be over and he was okay with just trading off pieces. He centralizes his king on d3. I pull my knight back to c4, centralizing it, looking at the e3 pawn as well. He plays his pawn up to e4, attacking the base of the pawn chain. I don't have to worry here. I can just advance Alfred down the board. And if he takes on d5, I can just recapture. This is what he does. So I just quickly recapture with e takes d5. And now I'm just planning on pushing Alfred the whole way. He sees that I want to push Alfred, so he pulls back to c2. I continue pushing, knowing that the b3 square is guarded by my pawn, and the a3 square is guarded by my knight, so he can't actually approach. So he moves his king over to b1, and now I can just basically move my king wherever I want, clean up the rest of the board, and he still has to babysit the pawn on a4 just in case it goes for promotion. He goes king a2. I just play king g5, getting closer to his g3 pawn. He goes king b1. I go king g4. He has to play his king somewhere. He can't really move anything else, can he? No, he can't. So he just plays back to a2. And I take the g3 pawn. I'm getting ready to promote here. King b1. Pawn f5. King a2. Pawn f4. King b1. Pawn f3. King a1. Pawn f2. And here he's trying to be sneaky. He goes king a2. And if I promote here to a queen, I would actually draw the game. And so instead I just push Alfred down the board. I give him the b3 square. Now I can promote safely. And so I'm glad I didn't rush this, but got a queen on f1. Now he's in a bit of trouble. His king's on the run, and I'm hoping to hunt him down fairly quickly here. His king goes up to b4. I check him with queen b1. He plays king to c5. And now I see I have a checkmate in 2. So I go queen to b6. He goes kings takes on d5. And I checkmate him with queen to c6. The engine said he played with an 87.3% accuracy, and I played with a 94.6%. Thankfully, I was able to play the game fairly simply and just play good moves. And the game wasn't crazy tactical. It was just playing off of his one mistake and then playing good moves throughout. Enjoyed this one. Was hopeful to win the last round of this tournament. Would end the tournament with 3.5 out of 4 points. Would be a very solid showing, and hopefully my rating would climb over 1500. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye for now.